We are so blessed to have with us today Donna DeNomme, who is a teacher and emeritus of the Center for Spiritual Living. She has written many books, which she has there on the table in the back, if you want to take some of those home. She's going to talk about the winds of change and how we're going to deal with all these changes coming on. And we are very, very thrilled to have you here, Donna, and your beautiful companion, beautiful Jasper. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Well, I already feel as if I've been to church and have filled up with just that opening, greeted by a dear friend from the past, Alicia, and Richard speaking about the trees and your readings and your music and your meditation.
Is the mic on?
It is.
I don't think so.
It is.
It really is.
Get a little closer.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah?
There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Anyway, thank you so much for the sharing that we've just had. I feel like my topic today certainly is going to be something that you're going to connect with. And I feel like if you already have a kinship with the wind, we can go a little bit deeper. And if you don't, maybe I can invite you to consider a few things about that wind. So I'll begin with a story. I sat cross-legged in contemplation. I could feel the brown earth beneath me. It was very unyielding and sturdy, strong and hard, and yet it was comforting too, because it had held me up and protected me through a very long time of sitting and being present on the earth for my vision quest, one of my vision quests. It was very hot that day. There was no wind, and it was almost stifling, where you can't breathe. Labored was my breath. Suddenly, I heard a voice outside of me, but very close, and it said, "I come to comfort you this day. For you have taught the little one Weston to call me by name, and long after you're gone, he will speak of me as friend." I had become a nanny when I had an urge to have another child. And instead I went and I became a nanny. And Weston was just this delightful little child, but he was terrified of the wind because we get high winds in the Rocky Mountain foothills, which was where his home was. And so when I arrived, I invited him during times of high winds and rain to sit in the window seat, all curled up in blankets, nice and cozy, and to look at what was happening outside with curiosity, with interest. And he did grow to accept the wind and eventually to befriend it. And, that's a thought too, befriend, because that my title was about embracing winds of change. But what I really want to say is befriending winds of change. And the prayer about God was much in that line as well, of us being part of nature and part of all there is and part of God. And so befriending to me is even more than embracing. You know, befriending is reciprocal. It's there's an equality there with befriending. Hopefully, there's not one dominant friend and one submissive friend. I know that happens, but not in the best of friendships, right? And so there's this respect and this seeing with true eyes and accepting the many forms, because we know that wind can be destructive as we can be destructive, right? So befriending to me is a sacred act. And in shamanic practice, certainly befriending creates allies, which then can be called on in a very powerful way to assist and for the good of the person or the good of the situation or the good of the whole. Actually, I wasn't going to tell this story, but it's calling to me. You know, I studied with a Peruvian shaman at one point who could not speak English, but only spoke in his native Quechuan. And he had a translator, and we were all sitting there under a covering, a shade covering. And he spoke very slowly so the translator could translate. And he said, when you work in harmony with nature, she translated, powerful things can happen. And as he finished his sentence, the wind came up suddenly and took the top of our shade off and blew it down the dirt road. Certainly it's good to have that kind of ally. Yes. So I want you to take a moment and think about, what are your beliefs? What are your thoughts about wind? Just kind of bring that into the room, into your mind. And what are your thoughts about change? Socrates said that wisdom begins with wonder. And I know that from Little Weston. Wonder and curiosity changed the wind from a negative to a positive. So if you take your hand and you blow in your palm, and let's do that one more time, only I want you to really pay attention to what you're feeling in there. Isn't it remarkable, that connection with the movement of wind? Certainly our breath is a part of that. And with our breath, you know, the wind or the breath that we breathe is tangible, yet it's kind of intangible. We can't really see it. We don't know where it originates when it's outside of us. When it's inside of us, obviously it comes from our lungs. If we don't breathe, we die, right? So we depend on it for our very lifeblood. And yet it's not really a concrete, solid thing. It's a movable thing. It's a flowing thing. It's a little bit elusive. We can control our breath, but only to a certain point. And then it kind of controls us. I have a quote I want to read in here. So it was interesting to me that through many, many traditions, breath is a divine gift. And many lineages, teach this. John 3:8 says, "The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it's going. So it is with everyone born of spirit." And then in Hebrew, there's a word, ruach, and it's translated into 3 different ways: as breath, as spirit, and as wind. One of the most powerful things that I've seen happen with wind and with harnessing wind is we can even soothe trauma or begin to heal our old wounds when working in conjunction with that wind. And we can use the breath to clear the dark energies, the hucha, the Andean shamans call it, in the body, to move that and to move that out and to release it to the earth. So let's consider for a moment your wisdom story. For me, your wisdom story is everything and anything that has ever happened to you, that you've ever thought, that you've ever experienced. Your emotions are part of that, how you show up, how you relate to people, what you bring to the table. It certainly is your success and your achievements, but it's also your hardships, your challenges, your traumas, your wounding, the things that I like to say are heavy or even burn to the touch, right? So when you think of your story, now I see that this community is a very positive, self-aware and involved group. So I would say that you're elevated in that way. But I want you to look within right now and see if anything kind of bubbles to the surface or pops in that may be a part of your wisdom story that is hanging in there past its expiration date, that is hanging in there past the time that it's been of any use to you, that it's ceased to have value, and maybe it's a negative part of the story that you tell over and over, or that pops in and nags you over and over, because sometimes that happens, right? Just see if anything comes in. And note it. If it does, kind of put your finger on it so you can come back to it a little bit later. I like to look into the outer world and what is happening in my particular part of that world and how I am reacting to it, because those are breadcrumbs that lead me back to myself. And being a study of depth psychology and the unconscious, I like to see what shows up that doesn't look like it's in alignment with my core values or my belief system. I had one of these recently, which is that I had a reaction to a COVID vaccine. And as a healer, as someone who has made my living as a healer for 35 years, I usually stay very healthy. And yet my dad, who just turned 98 and still lives on his own with 2 hours of assistance a day to make sure he's eating and all of that, I was going to help him with different things and wanted to make sure that I wouldn't bring anything that would then compromise his health. So I had, COVID vaccines, and I was one of the small percentage that has reacted to that. And the condition showed up in my mouth in the form of very painful sores and cracks, and even a very large cauliflower scab that would bleed when I would talk. And my living in one way or another is through talking, through speaking, often in public with people I don't know, but also in private session with clients and students. This was a challenge. This was a challenge that brought me in deeper. And I won't go through the layers, but we all know that story. The onion's been around for a long time, right? And each layer brings blessings. Each layer brings insight. So if there's anything that showed up for you, I really invite you to go in deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper. And if you don't have somebody already that you work with, to reach out in your community to those who are your mentors and your helpers to help with that. But today, let's focus on the wind. So that hand that you blew into, we know that it's already blessed, it's sanctioned there with your breath. So I want you to envision that you take out of your mind's eye or your heart or wherever in your body anything that might have shown up for you lives. Put it in your hand right now. Hold your hand out like that. Put it in there. Just imagine it in there. And go ahead and close your eyes if they're not already closed. And as you breathe a nice cleansing breath, just connect with that universal breath that so many lineages speak of. That breath that's connected with God. Know the power of your breath. Know the power of your word. We see it in prayer. And as you breathe gently in with intention, you're going to do an out breath in a moment that's going to cover whatever you put in your hand. So let's breathe in slowly and purposefully, and breathe out with intention. And one more time. Now I have an affirmation for you to join me if you choose. It's actually one of my favorite affirmations. It's in my Turtle Wisdom book, so I had it 20 years ago. It goes like this. Kaka be gone, Kaka transform. Join after me. Kaka be gone, Kaka transform. One more time with exuberance. Kaka be gone, Kaka transform. And so it is. Okay. So I'm being a little comical, but I'm serious when I say wind can clear you. I used to lead spiritual retreats to Mexico, and sometimes we would go to Tulum. Has anybody been to Tulum? So, the temple, when you stand there next to the water, the wind is coming in with such force, and it's mixed with salt from the water, and it's just incredibly cleansing. So I always like to go to that visual when I have the intention of clearing. I have another story. So I was traveling with my friends, the Lovings, that's really their names, Bill and Sue Loving. And they've been sailors for decades. And I was on their boat in Florida, and we were traveling around to these little islands and going on adventures. It was a lot of fun. At the beginning of our journey, which went over a period of about 10 days, Bill had asked me to create an altar space to hold the safety and the pleasure of our trip, which I did. At the end of our adventures, we were traveling back home, and we took off in the morning, and he had some kind of little gauge that would tell us when we were going to arrive. And the wind started meeting us head on. So he did what I was told was called tacking, where he would go this way for a long time, and then that way for a long time, and then back for a long time to cut across the wind. And that gauge kept getting later and later and later. And we were sailing by a beautiful, pristine beach with a red umbrella and a yellow umbrella and a blue umbrella and little kids running around, and you could see the sand was almost glowing. It was so, white or light. And Bill was looking at the gauge, and now it said 4:30 a.m. And he looked at me and he said, "Isn't there something you can do?" And I said, "Actually, there is." So I went in and I moved a few things around, and I did an honest prayer. And I went and I sat down, and no more did my butt hit the cushion on the seat, that this huge wind came up, and I looked over, and the pristine beach just looked like a wall of sand. And I want to tell you, the kids were fine, just in case you're following that story, right? Bill yells, "Drop the sails!" And everyone starts scurrying around except me, because I have no idea what I'm doing on a boat. So I pray. That's what I do, right? When it was all over and the wind had stabilized, it was now at our back, and the little gauge said the exact same time as it had when we first started out. So I want to be clear. I do not manipulate the weather. That would not be wise. But we can request, and that's so similar to me of how I talk to God. We don't demand, at least most of us don't, but to request, to ask for, I think is a wonderful way to pray. And in fact, being raised Catholic, there was a word, and I want to put this out there in case anybody knows what this word is, because I've been trying to remember it for a few years. There was a word to say when you go to God for the benefit of someone else.
Petitioning. When you're petitioning for someone else.
I thought intercession. I think that's the word. Okay, intercession. I have to remember that. Because it supposedly carries more weight. And I love that idea. It's one of the things I've taken with me, right? So winds can also blow things in. Remember Mary Poppins? Sometimes if there's a big wind and it's being a bit of a pest, you can go inside of your house where you're safe, but you can connect with that wind And you can ask, okay, what are you bringing in? What are you bringing in for me? What are these winds of change? We can also release our seeds in the wind, our intentions, our thoughts, our prayers. That creative force is so strong. You know, the one that moves through us is also there in the wind. And so I feel like that has applications for our country and our world right now. How can we shift and change what we see that may not be in alignment with our highest human evolution? How can we shift and change that? Can we see it in the form of the wind moving gently through and clearing? And it may not be exactly what we personally want, but what is for the highest good of everyone. Just breathing a moment as we breathe that idea in. And we do know the power of the word in prayer, which is engaging that element of wind. So I really like to just complete my thoughts with a prayer. And on the other end of this, if anyone has any questions, if we still have time, I'd be happy to entertain them. O Great Spirit, Creator, Infinite Divine, I feel you all around me in the natural world, in the warmth of the sun, in the strength of the earth, in the whispers of the wind. And I feel you in the gentle movement of my own breath. I know you are breathing through the one who breathes next to me and the one across the way. We are united in that universal breath. For you breathe your divine essence through us, and it expresses in our unique form. I savor the sweetness of all of life, that which is beautiful, inspiring, and beloved. I also embrace that which is ugly, difficult, heavy, or burns to the touch. For I know these forms are not absolute, but rather pliable, clay in your hands and mine. And so I give thanks for the fact that you are always present there with us, whether it is our darkest hour or our most glorious day. I give thanks for the transitions, the time of change, when things move and shift. I give thanks for each of us in this room and beyond, and our contribution to the evolving human being. And so I release my word, blowing it into the wind like a dandelion wish, believing that it has already planted as a seed in that creative force of mind, and knowing that it is already returning to fruition. I let it go, I let it be, and so it is. Amen.